All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast. We are continuing our series on programming. This is the 8th episode. This is Power Endurance today. So if you're new to the series, just catch you up real quick. We're going over the hard-to-kill programming methodology. It's the method and methods we use in Garage Gym Athlete programming, truly what makes us unique. And this hard-to-kill methodology is a blend of longevity training and also performance. So it's kind of hitting on both. So ultimately, you can live a long time and do a lot of cool stuff in the process. And today we're talking about power endurance. And this will close out the endurance continuum. So I went over the strength continuum, was the first 4 episodes: strength, speed, strength, and speed. You can go back and listen to any of those. And now we're in the endurance continuum. So I've gone over aerobic endurance, muscular endurance, strength endurance, and today I'm talking about power endurance. And just a quick reminder, they're not all continuums. This is the final continuum in the 8th episode here, but a continuum typically means prerequisite. It just means that you should build up other things before you go to the next. So this has been in order on purpose. We did aerobic endurance, muscular endurance, strength endurance, and now we're rounding out with power endurance. And I want everybody to know kind of up front, the prerequisite to training power endurance is having a lot of strength endurance, muscular endurance, and aerobic endurance, and even having that strength background through the strength continuum. Power endurance is one of those areas where I would even go so far as to say it's an optional training methodology. I mean, in reality, everything's optional, right? You don't have to train every single modality. You don't have to train every area. But if you are interested in our type of training and you want to be really well-rounded, then you want to train as much as you can. But power endurance is a crazy one. And I'm going to start this one off with a story because I think it better illustrates than me just, kind of explaining power endurance to you. But I'll never forget when I was in the Air Force, I got assigned to the 2-4 Special Operations Wing, and I was the new guy. And when I showed up, I was checking in and everything, and obviously within special operations, there's like a huge fitness component to that. And I was part of the leadership staff, and they were like, "Ooh, here's the new guy. We're gonna be PT is tomorrow morning, 0500, like whatever. It's gonna be rough, and we're gonna be 100% focused on you." And then, everybody let me know like, "Hey, tomorrow's your first day. It's going to be tough. Like they're going to really run you through the ringer from a fitness standpoint." And then that was just kind of the running joke. They try to make you nervous about it all day. Like, it's just part of the culture. They were just like, "Oh, tomorrow's going to be rough for you, Captain," like just all this stuff. And then I'll never forget, like, I was sitting there thinking, like, I'd been training a lot up to this point, like constantly. Twice a day for years, like once a day, hard training. Like I've just been doing like all sorts of training. And so I actually started to get a little bit nervous. And then it just occurred to me at some point, I was like, what are they going to do? Like what can even happen from a fitness standpoint that would be hard for me? And I just kind of started to look. I hadn't developed this methodology, but I'd been doing a lot of this type of training. I just hadn't put, frameworks to it. And I was like, what could they possibly do? I'm like, are they going to have me run a long time? I was like, I'm not really scared of that. Like, they're probably not going to have me lift weight. I'm probably stronger than most of these guys. I'm like, what is are we going to go really high intensity for a short duration? There just was nothing that I was afraid of. And then once I kind of realized that, I was like, what are they going to do? Like I do worse things to myself than anyone is going to be able to do to me. And then I just wasn't nervous anymore. And when I showed up the next day for that training session, I was right. Like they put me through a really hard session, but I was like, there's nothing that can happen to me on the fitness side that like, there's no hole, right? There was no hole in my fitness. And after that, it gave me so much confidence. Because I'm not trying to sound arrogant, but I had trained in such a well-rounded way intentionally that there was no like me showing up and you finding my weakness. Now, not that I was like the fittest guy in the world. You could definitely like, there were fitter people who could like do more, do better, do faster, whatever, do harder. But like there was nothing that was going to be exposed. And where that's different for a lot of athletes is like if you bring an endurance athlete to something that has power endurance or strength or whatever, they're going to quickly, you'll find the holes in their armor. Or if you bring a really strong athlete to the table and then you find out, oh wow, they can't run a mile or they can't do a pull-up. Like you find all these things, but I didn't have any gaping holes like that in my fitness. And that just helped me very quickly realize, hey, I'm incredibly well-rounded. And one of the things they had me do was very much a power endurance test. And to this day, I have not repeated it, but it was one of the hardest things that I have done. It hurt so bad. Like it hurt so bad. And it's not even that crazy, but it was 75 swings at 70 pounds, 70 swings at 70 pounds. So 2 pood kettlebell, which is like 72. So yeah, 72 swings. I believe that's 2 pood. So the Russian measurement for weight. They had me do 72 swings at 72 pounds unbroken. And if you just think about that for a minute, that's incredibly hard. So you can go try this with any kettlebell you want. You could try a 25-pound kettlebell for 25 reps, a 35 for 35 reps, 53 for 53 reps, but a 72-pound kettlebell for 72 reps unbroken was very challenging. And I'll never forget, you have run out of oxygen, your muscles are burning, everything hurts, your forearms are burning from the grip, like your legs are burning, everything is just burning. But I had trained power endurance, and that's ultimately what that was. So while it did hurt and it was super painful, I didn't quit. And I think that's what they wanted. I didn't give up. So ultimately, power endurance, I illustrated through a story today as opposed to telling you exactly what it is. But if I had to break it down, it is exactly that. It's explosive moves for the long haul. So think about anything that's explosive, whether that's a kettlebell snatch, whether that's a kettlebell swing, whether that is, an Olympic lift or jumping, plyometrics, anything that is power-based, meaning you move fast explosively, you're able to do that for long periods of time, repeated. And I think, this is my personal opinion, if you have a high level of power endurance, it's hard to get that. But if you do, this is what makes you a beast. It's just because no one else touches it. There are 2 things that people don't like to train. And that's ultimately the lactic side of training, the glycolytic side of training, which is very similar to power endurance. People don't like to go 2 minutes all out, highest, hardest intensity. So a lot of people don't train that. Same with power endurance because it kind of goes into that glycolytic frame. But at the same time, people don't want to train it. It's very hard. It's very difficult. But if you can and you do achieve these things, you are just an absolute beast. Power endurance, being able to do a lot of kettlebell swings, a lot of explosive stuff for repeated efforts. Now, I mentioned strength endurance makes you athletic. This is what makes you a beast. So if you have that strength endurance base, you're going to be incredibly athletic and maintain that athleticism. And this is just going to actually make you good at those. Anything that has repeated explosive demands, whether that's basketball, sprints, jumps, soccer, MMA. Like MMA, if you're doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu, anything like that, power endurance is huge. And a lot of people overlook how important or how amazing it could be for sports like that. And I know a lot of people are into doing that kind of training these days. So it is awesome. There are a lot of benefits if you want to be able to do anything athletic or anything short distance sprints. And really, like I said, just be a beast. Power endurance is everything. So what are some ways that we can really get into it? Well, like I said, you need to make sure that you have that base of aerobic, muscular, and strength endurance is built before you get into it. But then after you started training it, it's not that hard to train, and there's not a lot of percentage of 1 rep max or anything like that. What you need to do, I think the best way to train it without getting, I'm just going to how to train it. The best way to train it is with a kettlebell, in my opinion. And the reason being is because it's safer than doing a lot of the things that you have with a barbell. I'm not going to recommend people do 30, 50 snatches with a barbell. CrossFit used to try and do that kind of stuff. I just don't think it's good. It's a very technical movement, hard to do repeated for long duration. So I don't actually recommend doing this with a barbell. I recommend doing it with a kettlebell. But then what you need to do with a kettlebell is you need to increase the weight. And so I can't give you an exact weight because power endurance doesn't necessarily work with like percentage of 1 rep max, but you have to know that it has to be heavy. It has to be something that's going to challenge you. And so there are 2 great ways to do this with a kettlebell. And the first one is in my example. So doing high rep, heavy kettlebell swings. You don't have to start with 50 reps at 50 or 70 reps at 70, but working up, doing like if like a heavy swing for you is 50 pounds, then doing sets of 10 or 15, and you'll feel it. You'll feel when you're starting to get into that power endurance, when all the, all your muscles like are starting to burn when you're going through it, like, you're starting to train power endurance, and then just doing these things and adding them to your training. So that's the first way, kettlebell swings. The other way, and this is something we use in our EO3 fit test, is the kettlebell snatch test. There's a 5-minute version. We do a 3-minute version. So as many kettlebell snatches as you can do in 3 minutes, and you alternate arms every single time. And so if you really want to test your power endurance, I don't know if there's a better way. I recommend most people starting with a 3-minute and not the 5-minute, and then just seeing how far you get, and then benchmarking and trying to get better and better at that. But if you don't stop and you just push yourself to keep going and keep going and keep going, that'll be one of the hardest tests that you've ever created or you've ever completed. Another way to assess power endurance in my mind is, if you really want to assess your power, you can do something like a 500-meter row for time. So all out, as hard as you can row, 500 meters, because what this does is it's in that time domain where you can still be in power endurance without having to go too deep into aerobic conditioning or anything like that, or glycolytic. But ultimately what you can do with a 500-meter row for time is you actually get to assess your power output, because a lot of times when it's that short duration, people aren't running into an issue where they're fatiguing, aerobically. They're typically, they're not strong enough to go any faster. So these are all great benchmarks to test. So testing the kettlebell snatch test, testing the 500-meter row, these are great power endurance tests. And then training it, I think training it almost exclusively with a barbell is fine. Plyometrics is okay. Again, doing too many of those things or doing them incorrectly could lead to injury. Too much with a barbell could lead to injury. So if we're looking to train power endurance, which is, it's really good for you, but ultimately comes with some risk, I think the safest way to do it is with a kettlebell. And I think that's ultimately how you should focus on it. And like I said, if you can do power endurance, if that is checked, that's in your wheelhouse, there's not much that can happen to you in the performance or fitness space that's going to scare you. You're capable of pretty much anything and ready to go for pretty much anything if you're training this modality. That's it for this one, and that concludes and wraps up our aerobic, our endurance continuum, going over aerobic, muscular strength, and power endurance. We'll get into energy system training next, and I'm really looking forward to it because that is some of the most popular topics that when we discuss them, they're very popular amongst our athletes. So if you are one of our athletes, I appreciate you sticking around, listening to the podcast, doing the training. And if you want to be a part of what we're doing, go to garagegymathlete.com, sign up for a free trial, and we would love to have you. Remember, if you don't kill comfort, comfort will kill you.